You know, there are some moments in life that change everything. Moments that split your existence into before and after. For me, that moment happened at a Thanksgiving dinner table in 2023, when my Aunt Patricia decided she was going to help me in front of my entire family. What she didn't expect was my response. What none of them expected was what I was about to reveal. I'm Sarah, and I'm 28 years old. I've been the family disappointment for as long as I can remember. You know the type. The one who didn't go to college right away, who bounced between jobs, who never seemed to have her life together while her cousins were getting married, buying houses, and having babies. I was the cautionary tale whispered about at family gatherings, the one they all felt sorry for but never quite knew how to help. My family is what you'd call traditionally successful. My parents, Robert and Linda, are both retired teachers who planned every aspect of their lives with military precision. My older brother Jake is a software engineer making six figures, married to his college sweetheart Amy, with two perfect kids named Madison and Connor. My younger sister Emma is a nurse practitioner, engaged to a doctor, living in a beautiful suburban home with a white picket fence. Literally, she has a white picket fence. And then there's me, Sarah, the one who dropped out of college after 2 years because I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do with my life. The one who worked retail jobs, restaurant jobs, temporary office work, anything to pay the bills while I tried to figure myself out. The one who lived in a studio apartment with furniture from thrift stores and a car that made concerning noises every time I started it. But here's what they didn't know. Here's what I'd been hiding from them for 3 years. I wasn't actually failing at life. I was building something that would change everything. The build-up to that Thanksgiving dinner started months earlier. My mom had been calling me more frequently, her voice filled with that particular brand of maternal worry that makes you feel guilty for existing. She'd ask about my situation, as she called it, and suggest I look into community college again, or maybe consider a trade school. Sarah, honey, you're 28 now. Don't you think it's time to get serious about your future? My dad would get on the phone and talk about his friend's daughter who just got her real estate license, or his neighbor's son who was doing very well in insurance sales. The subtext was always the same. Why can't you be more like them? Why can't you just be normal? My siblings were more subtle, but equally persistent. Jake would send me job postings he'd found online, usually with a message like, "Thought you might be interested in this." Emma would invite me to dinner and casually mention that her hospital was hiring for administrative positions. No experience necessary, and they provide training. The thing is, I loved my family. I really did. But their constant attempts to fix me, to mold me into their version of success, were suffocating. They saw my unconventional path as a problem to be solved rather than a choice to be respected. They meant well, but their good intentions felt like judgment, and their concern felt like disappointment. Aunt Patricia was the worst of all of them. She was my mom's older sister, a woman who had built her entire identity around being the family's unofficial life coach. She was the one who always had advice, who always knew better, who always had a solution for everyone else's problems. She was successful in her own right. She owned a small marketing firm and had raised 3 kids who all became exactly what she wanted them to become. She was used to being listened to, used to being the authority figure, used to having her advice taken as gospel. Every family gathering was the same with Patricia. She'd corner me at some point, usually when I was trying to enjoy a quiet moment, and launch into her latest theory about what was wrong with my life and how I could fix it. She'd heard about this program, or read about that opportunity, or knew someone who could help me get my life on track. "Sarah, you're such a bright girl," she'd say, her voice dripping with condescension disguised as encouragement. "You just need to apply yourself. You need to get focused. You need to stop drifting and start building something real." I'd nod politely, make non-committal sounds, and try to change the subject. But Patricia was relentless. She'd follow up with phone calls, text messages, emails with job listings and motivational articles. She'd made fixing me her personal mission, and she wasn't going to give up until I was properly molded into her vision of success. The months leading up to that Thanksgiving were particularly intense. I'd been working on something big, something that required all of my time and energy, something that kept me busy from early morning until late at night. But I couldn't tell them about it. Not yet. It wasn't ready, and I wasn't sure it ever would be. The risk of failure was too high, and the potential for family disappointment was too great. So when my mom called to ask what I was up to, I'd give vague answers. Just working on some projects, keeping busy. When Jake asked if I was still doing the same job, I'd say something like that. When Emma worried about my finances, I'd assure her I was managing fine. None of it was technically a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The truth was that 3 years earlier, I'd started writing. Not just casual writing, not just journaling or blogging, but serious, dedicated, professional writing. I'd been working on a novel, but more importantly, I'd been freelance writing for clients all over the world. I'd built up a portfolio of work that I was proud of, developed relationships with editors and publishers, and slowly but surely, I was making a living doing something I loved. It started small. A friend of a friend needed someone to write product descriptions for their online store. Then someone else needed blog posts for their wellness website. Then a small business needed help with their marketing copy. Word spread, referrals came in, and before I knew it, I was juggling multiple clients and making more money than I'd ever made in any of my real jobs. But here's the thing about freelance writing. It's invisible to most people. There's no office to go to, no uniform to wear, no obvious markers of traditional employment. To the outside world, especially to family members who valued conventional success, it looked like I was just sitting at home on my computer all day, not doing anything important. The novel I was working on was getting serious attention. I'd been querying agents for months, and I was in the final rounds of consideration with several top literary agencies. But I couldn't bring myself to tell my family about it. What if it didn't work out? What if I got rejected? What if they got their hopes up, and then I disappointed them again? So I kept quiet. I kept working. I kept building something that might, just might, change everything. As Thanksgiving approached, the family pressure intensified. My mom called to tell me that Patricia was especially looking forward to seeing me, that she'd been talking about having a serious conversation about my future. My dad mentioned that Patricia had some great ideas for career opportunities that might be perfect for me. Emma texted to warn me that Patricia had been asking a lot of questions about my situation and seemed to be planning some kind of intervention. I considered not going. I really did. I thought about calling in sick, or claiming I had to work, or just disappearing for the weekend. But ultimately, I couldn't do it. These were my people, my family, and despite everything, I loved them. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be part of the tradition, part of the gathering, part of the messy, complicated, beautiful chaos that is family. So I went. The dinner was at my parents' house, same as always. The same dining room table that had hosted countless family meals, the same mismatched chairs that had been collected over decades, the same slightly crooked chandelier that my dad had installed himself and refused to fix properly. My mom had outdone herself with the decorations. Autumn leaves scattered across the table, candles in glass holders shaped like tiny pumpkins, a centerpiece that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Everyone was there. Jake and Amy with their kids, Emma and her fiancé David, my parents looking proud and happy to have the whole family together, and of course, Patricia with her husband Robert and their youngest daughter Jessica, who was home from college for the weekend. The conversation started normally enough. We talked about the weather, about the kids' school activities, about Emma's wedding plans, about Jake's latest promotion at work. I participated as much as I could, asked questions, laughed at jokes, played with my nephew and niece. For a while, it felt like maybe this time would be different. Maybe Patricia would be distracted by other things. Maybe she'd leave me alone for once. But I should have known better. It started during the main course. We were all digging into my mom's famous turkey, passing around dishes of stuffing and mashed potatoes and green bean casserole, when Patricia suddenly turned to me with that look. You know the one. The look that says, "I'm about to help you whether you want it or not." "So, Sarah," she said, her voice cutting through the comfortable chatter, "I've been thinking about your situation a lot lately." The table got quieter. Not silent, but definitely quieter. Jake kept eating, but his shoulders tensed. Emma shot me a sympathetic look. My parents exchanged glances. Everyone knew what was coming. "I've been doing some research," Patricia continued, completely oblivious to the discomfort she was causing. And I think I found some really great opportunities that might be perfect for you. There's this program at the community college for people who want to get back on track. It's specifically designed for adults who need to find their direction. And I know someone who knows someone at the county office who said they're always looking for reliable people in administration. She paused to take a bite of turkey, clearly expecting me to be grateful for her research, waiting for me to ask for more details about these wonderful opportunities she'd discovered for me. I set down my fork. I looked around the table at my family, these people who loved me but didn't really see me, who wanted the best for me, but couldn't understand that their version of best might not be mine. Patricia, I said quietly, I appreciate your concern, but I'm actually doing fine. She laughed, actually laughed. Oh, honey, I know you think you're doing fine, but let's be realistic here. You're 28 years old. You don't have a career. You're living in that tiny apartment, driving that old car. There's no shame in admitting you need help. We all need help sometimes. The conversation at the table had stopped completely now. Everyone was listening, waiting to see where this was going. Madison asked if she could be excused to go play, and Amy quietly took both kids into the living room. The adults remained, trapped in this moment that was about to become something much bigger than anyone expected. I'm not asking for help, I said, my voice still calm but with an edge that made my mother look nervous. I'm doing fine on my own. Sarah, sweetie, Patricia said, and I could hear the condescension dripping from every word. I know you want to be independent, but independence without stability isn't really independence at all. You need structure. You need a plan. You need to start thinking about your future seriously. I think about my future every day, I said. But what are you actually doing about it? Patricia pressed. Where's the action? Where's the progress? You can't just drift through life hoping things will work out. You need to make concrete steps toward real goals. That's when something inside me snapped. Not in an angry way, not in a dramatic, explosive way, but in a quiet, decisive way. I realized I was done. Done with the judgment, done with the assumptions, done with being treated like a problem to be solved. You want to know what I'm doing about my future? I said, my voice still quiet, but now with a steel undertone that made everyone at the table sit up straighter. You want to know about concrete steps and real goals? Patricia nodded eagerly, probably thinking she'd finally gotten through to me, that I was about to admit defeat and ask for her help. I'm a writer, I said. I've been a professional writer for 3 years. I make my living writing for clients all over the world. I work with Fortune 500 companies. I write marketing copy for million-dollar campaigns. I create content for websites that get millions of views. I've made more money in the last 6 months than I ever made at any of those real jobs you all keep trying to get me to go back to. The table was dead silent now. Patricia's fork was halfway to her mouth, suspended in air like she'd been frozen in time. But that's not even the big news, I continued, feeling a strange sense of liberation as I finally spoke my truth. The big news is that 2 weeks ago, I signed with one of the top literary agents in New York. She's representing my novel, and we already have 3 publishers interested in bidding on it. The advance they're talking about is more than most people make in 2 years. I paused, looking around the table at their shocked faces. My parents looked stunned. Jake's mouth was literally hanging open. Emma was staring at me like I'd just revealed I was a secret agent. And yesterday, I said, saving the best for last, I got a call from my agent. Netflix wants to option my book for a limited series. They want to turn my story into a show. The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen, the sound of the kids playing in the living room, the distant hum of the refrigerator. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Patricia finally put her fork down. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, then closed it again. For the first time in my life, I had rendered my aunt speechless. "Sarah," my mom finally whispered, "is this real?" I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I showed them the email chain with my agent, the contract I'd signed, the initial offer from Netflix. I showed them my client list, my income statements, the testimonials from companies I'd worked with. I showed them 3 years of building something real, something substantial, something that was mine. "Why didn't you tell us?" my dad asked, his voice barely audible. That's when the emotion hit me. All the years of feeling like I wasn't good enough, All the family gatherings where I felt like the failure, all the well-meaning advice that felt like judgment, all the times I'd questioned whether I was making the right choices, it all came flooding back. Because of this, I said, and my voice cracked for the first time. Because of exactly this reaction. Because I knew that if I told you I was trying to be a writer, you'd all try to talk me out of it. You'd tell me it wasn't realistic, that I needed a backup plan, that I should focus on something more practical. You'd treat it like a hobby, like a phase I was going through, like another one of Sarah's crazy ideas that would never work out. Tears started flowing down my cheeks, but I kept going. I needed to prove to myself that I could do this before I could prove it to anyone else. I needed to know that I was capable of success on my own terms, not just success according to your definitions. I needed to build something that was mine, that I'd created, that nobody could take away from me or diminish or explain away. Patricia finally found her voice. Sarah, honey, we never meant to make you feel like— Yes, you did, I interrupted, and my voice was stronger now, more sure. Maybe not intentionally, but you did. Every time you offered to help me find a real job, every time you suggested I needed to get serious about my life, every time you acted like my choices were problems to be solved, you were telling me that who I was and what I wanted didn't matter. You were telling me that your way was the only right way. I looked around the table at each of them. I love you all. I really do. But you never once asked me what I wanted to do with my life. You never asked me what I was passionate about, what I was working toward, what my dreams were. You just assumed I was lost and needed to be found. Jake was the first to speak. Sarah, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I thought I was being helpful when I sent you those job postings, but I never asked if you wanted help finding a different kind of job. Emma nodded, tears in her eyes. I did the same thing. I was so focused on trying to get you into something stable that I never considered that maybe you'd already found something stable that just looked different from what I expected. My parents were both crying now. My mom reached across the table and took my hand. We're so proud of you, sweetheart. We always have been. We just worried because we couldn't see what you were building, and we wanted you to be happy and secure. I am happy, I said. I'm happier than I've ever been. I wake up every morning excited about what I'm working on. I love my clients, I love my projects, I love the flexibility and creativity and challenge of what I do. I love that I'm building something that's mine, that reflects who I am and what I care about. Patricia had been quiet through all of this, but now she cleared her throat. Sarah, I owe you an apology, a big one. I thought I was helping, but I realize now that I was being presumptuous and condescending. I made assumptions about your life without knowing anything about what you were actually doing. She paused, looking genuinely remorseful. I'm proud of you too. What you've accomplished is incredible, and you did it all on your own. That takes courage and determination and talent, and I should have recognized that instead of trying to push you into something conventional. The conversation that followed was unlike any family discussion we'd ever had. For the first time, they asked me real questions about my work. They wanted to know about my writing process, about my clients, about the book I'd written. They wanted to understand this world I'd built for myself that they'd never seen. I told them about the novel, about the characters who had lived in my head for years before I finally got brave enough to put their story on paper. I told them about the research I'd done, the late nights and early mornings I'd spent writing and rewriting, the rejection letters I'd received before finding the right agent. I told them about my freelance work, about the satisfaction of helping small businesses tell their stories, about the thrill of seeing my words published on websites and in magazines. Jake asked about the business side of things, how I found clients, how I managed my finances, how I handled taxes and contracts and all the practical aspects of self-employment. Emma wanted to know about the creative process, about where ideas came from, about how I developed characters and plot lines. My parents asked about the Netflix deal, about what it would mean for my future, about whether I'd have to move to Los Angeles or New York. For the first time in years, I felt seen by my family, not as a problem to be solved or a person to be fixed, but as someone who had made deliberate choices and built something meaningful. They were genuinely interested in my work, genuinely proud of my accomplishments, genuinely excited about my future. The rest of the evening was magical. We talked and laughed and shared stories like we hadn't in years. The kids came back to the table for dessert, and Madison asked if she could read my book when it came out. Connor wanted to know if the Netflix show would have superheroes in it. Even Patricia seemed different, more respectful, more curious, more willing to listen than to advise. As the evening wound down and people started to leave, each family member made a point of telling me how proud they were, how sorry they were for not seeing what I was building, how excited they were to watch my success unfold. Jake promised to stop sending me job postings unless I specifically asked for them. Emma said she wanted to help me celebrate when the book deal was finalized. My parents said they'd always known I was special, they just hadn't understood how that specialness would manifest. But it was Patricia who surprised me the most. As she was getting ready to leave, she pulled me aside. "Sarah," she said, "I've been thinking about what you said tonight, about how we never asked you what you wanted to do with your life. You're right. I've been so focused on helping everyone achieve what I thought was success that I never stopped to consider that there might be different definitions of success." She paused, looking thoughtful. "You know, I've been running my marketing firm for 15 years, and I've been successful by conventional standards. But I've never been as passionate about my work as you obviously are about yours. I've never had that spark in my eyes when I talk about what I do. You have something special, and I'm sorry it took me so long to recognize it." Then she asked me something that completely caught me off guard. "Would you be willing to have lunch with me sometime? Not so I can give you advice, but so I can learn from you? I'd love to understand more about your writing process, about how you built your freelance business, about how you had the courage to pursue something so unconventional." I agreed, and we made plans to meet the following week. As I drove home that night, I felt like a different person than the one who had arrived at dinner earlier that evening. The weight of hiding, of pretending, of constantly defending my choices was gone. In its place was a lightness, a sense of being fully seen and accepted by the people who mattered most to me. The lunch with Patricia the following week was revelatory. She told me that my story had made her think about her own life, about the choices she'd made, and the dreams she'd set aside in pursuit of conventional success. She admitted that she'd been living vicariously through other people's achievements, trying to create the perfect life for everyone around her, because she'd never quite figured out what perfect meant for herself. "I've been so busy telling everyone else how to live," she said, "that I forgot to ask myself if I was living the way I wanted to live." We talked for hours about dreams and risks and the courage it takes to build something from nothing. Patricia shared stories about her own creative interests that she'd abandoned over the years: painting, poetry, photography, all set aside in favor of more practical pursuits. She talked about the marketing firm she'd built, how successful it was financially, but how empty it sometimes felt creatively. By the end of that lunch, we'd formed a different kind of relationship. Instead of the dynamic of advisor and advisee, we became two women supporting each other's journeys, sharing experiences and insights, learning from each other's perspectives. Patricia started taking art classes again, something she hadn't done in 20 years. She began incorporating more creative elements into her marketing work, finding ways to merge her business success with her artistic interests. The ripple effects of that Thanksgiving dinner continued for months. My family's understanding of my work opened up new possibilities for all of us. Jake started asking me for advice about freelance opportunities in his field, curious about the flexibility and independence that came with self-employment. Emma began considering whether there were ways to use her medical skills in more creative or entrepreneurial ways. My parents became my biggest cheerleaders, telling their friends about my writing career with the same pride they'd once reserved for Jake's engineering achievements or Emma's nursing accomplishments. They started reading more, asking me for book recommendations, wanting to understand the literary world I was becoming part of. The Netflix deal moved forward, and I found myself in meetings with executives and producers discussing adaptations and storylines and character development. It was surreal and exciting and terrifying all at once. But through it all, I had my family's support in a way I'd never experienced before. The book was published 8 months later, and the launch party was held at a local bookstore. My entire family was there, along with friends and colleagues and people from the writing community I'd become part of. Seeing my name on the cover of an actual book, seeing people lined up to buy copies, seeing my family's faces filled with pride and amazement. It was better than any dream I'd ever had about success. Patricia gave a speech that night that brought tears to everyone's eyes. She talked about the importance of believing in people's dreams, even when those dreams look different from what we expect. She talked about the courage it takes to pursue an unconventional path, and the wisdom that comes from trusting yourself even when others don't understand your choices. Sarah taught me that love isn't about trying to fix someone or change them into what you think they should be, she said. Love is about seeing someone for who they truly are and supporting them in becoming the fullest version of themselves. Sarah was never broken, and she never needed fixing. She just needed to be seen. The Netflix series went into production the following year, and I was hired as a consultant and producer. I got to work with writers and directors and actors, helping to bring my characters to life on screen. It was a dream I'd never even known I had until it became reality. But the real victory wasn't the professional success, as wonderful as that was. The real victory was the transformation in my family relationships. We'd learned to see each other more clearly, to ask better questions, to support each other's authentic journeys rather than trying to impose our own definitions of success on each other. That Thanksgiving dinner became a family legend, the story we tell about the night Sarah finally spoke her truth and changed everything. But for me, it represents something even more important. The moment I learned that being seen and accepted for who you really are is worth any risk, any discomfort, any difficult conversation. Sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who see us least clearly, not because they don't care, but because they care so much that they want to protect us from what they perceive as risky or uncertain paths. But protection can become limitation, and concern can become judgment, and love can become a cage if we're not careful. The courage to be authentic, to pursue your own definition of success, to build something that reflects your true values and passions, that's not selfish or impractical. It's necessary. It's how we become who we're meant to be, and it's how we give our gifts to the world in the way only we can give them. If you're listening to this and you're hiding parts of yourself, if you're pursuing dreams that others don't understand, if you're building something that doesn't fit conventional definitions of success, keep going. Trust yourself. Trust your vision. Trust that the people who truly love you will learn to see you clearly if you give them the chance. And if you're someone who loves someone whose path looks different from what you expected, ask questions instead of giving advice. Listen more than you speak. Support their journey instead of trying to redirect it. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is believing in their dreams, even when you don't understand them. That night at the dinner table, when I finally found the courage to speak my truth, I didn't just change my family's perception of me. I changed my own understanding of what was possible when we stop hiding and start showing up as who we really are. The silence that fell over that table wasn't just shock. It was the sound of assumptions crumbling, of old patterns breaking, of love expanding to include new possibilities. It was the sound of a family learning to see each other differently, and in doing so, learning to love each other more fully. And that, more than any book deal or Netflix series, was the real transformation. That was the moment everything changed.